views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. Last week, the Department of City Planning convened the Bronx Metro North Working Group to begin the process of establishing commuter rail stations in the Bronx at Hunts Point, Parkchester, Van Nest, Morris Park, and Cobb City, 4 of them. It's an enterprising plan that's been long needed and desired. The implications of the project are far-reaching, even past improved transportation access. Organizers hope to also see it boost local economies. But it's a big job that will require top-flight planning, including work from city and state agencies and input from you people in the Bronx. Tonight we will review the entire project with the director of the Bronx office at the Department of City Planning. We'll also show off exclusive graphics that were created by the city for this program to show you exactly where the stations are planned for in each neighborhood. We'll also talk about a couple of other Bronx projects, if we have time, that are in the pipeline. Please join me in welcoming back to Bronx Talk the director of the Bronx office at the Department of City Planning, Carol Samol. Nice to have you with us.
Nice to be here, Gary.
So let's talk about it. It's an exciting plan. I can't tell you how many times over the past dozen years I've heard people say, well, we need more Metro North stations, we need more Metro North stations. It's finally going to happen. Let's start talking about the working group. Who was convened and what was their charge at this early stage of the process?
Well, this is such an important project to the entire borough and to our economy that we needed to convene a group that could help us think borough-wide and think broadly about the whole transit corridor. And so we have a group and that could also then help us with our public events as we go station by station, because that's how the planning work will go. It's elected officials, it's major landholders and residents groups like Co-op City, Parkchester, Con Ed is at the table. They're a major landholder right at the Parkchester Van Nest station. And then larger Bronx groups and healthcare providers like Montefiore, which of course has a huge campus at Morris Park with Albert Einstein there. So they are charged with helping us think broadly about the service, about thinking being visionary with this, and bringing people to local events. And helping us really shape the kind of recommendations that will come out of this based on public input.
Before we even get into the planning, I know people, especially in those neighborhoods, are saying, my goodness, where in the neighborhood, what's going to happen? We're going to talk about that. Is there or isn't there a large infrastructure issue? Because, I mean, are we laying tracks through Bronx neighborhoods? Are there existing facilities? Are there already kind of pathways that the train will follow? I mean, before we even talk about this, those other specifics, how big a project is this?
Yeah, it is a major investment and has a lot of infrastructure. This service will actually provide access to Penn Station, which is, Metro North does not provide access to Penn Station today.
So it's the west side of Midtown,
the west side of Manhattan.
Interesting.
So what's going to happen? This is all of the infrastructure moves that have to happen. MTA is working with Amtrak to provide access to for the Long Island Railroad to have access to the Grand Central. Right now, Long Island Railroad only goes into Penn Station. So they're going to open up some slots in Grand Central, and Long Island Railroad trains will be able to go in there. And when that happens, so there are a lot of conditions, then there are some spots open in Penn Station that will allow us to get service in the Bronx to Penn Station along the Metro North.
Why were those 4 spots chosen? Parkchester, Van Nest, Morris Park, Hunts Point, and Cobb City.
Yeah, very good question. We do not have regional rail service east of the Bronx River, and this will,
Sure, anywhere along there. I was just curious about those particular neighborhoods.
So we chose that, or the MTA really chose them in consultation, but based on the tracks and where the tracks allow service. Historically, there were some stations at some of these locations, but also there are major job centers already in the borough: Hunts Point, Morris Park, population centers, Co-op City, Parkchester. So it all made sense that these 4 would be the selection.
Certainly, I would fend for our friends in the East Bronx at Co-op City. They have been isolated for so long.
Right.
This really will make a connection. We have a map. Let's show that first map so people can get a general vision of what the thing will look like. And then back to my original question: will there be track laying them down, and will it be disruptive in communities? There's the map there. Yeah.
That's the beauty of this, Gary, is we're getting 4 new stations, and we don't have to lay significant track. Right.
Wow.
It's filling in some things, so
we're really just putting stations where existing.
Right, along the Amtrak line, existing Amtrak line. So it's existing.
So I'm asking you the last question first. Really, soup to nuts. How long before a train will actually stop at Parkchester, Van Nest, a Metro North train?
Well, right now they're projecting to have the Grand Central Long Island Railroad connection by, I want to say, 2023. And that's probably about when we would get Metro North service, shortly thereafter. So it's soon, in planning terms, that's soon.
I want to talk about the timeline because there were some fascinating things in there, and you know it like you know your own name. People in the Bronx want to have their say. They don't want people coming in their neighborhoods doing things they don't want to see, and so there are specific activities designed for that input. So let's talk about that initially. We're going to put the timeline on the screen, and then I want you to tell me what you're expecting to see and hear. Here is, I think they're going to put it up on the screen. Here is the timeline. You can see July 2018. I guess we've already passed that. The first dialogue is about Parkchester, Van Nest. The green is a working group meeting, and the red is a public workshop. What is the difference, and what are we expecting for those activities?
Yeah, so I guess I've been remiss too in kind of describing also the charge that we've been given from other working group members. The Bronx Borough President is the co-chair with the Economic Development Corporation, Department of Transportation, and Department of City Planning in this working group. And he and the working group agreed that, or the chairs agreed that we need to come in and think boldly and broadly about each of these station areas, do a public engagement process, but do it in a defined time frame. Don't let this drag on for too long, right? So get it done.
You must have been around for a little while to know all that.
So that's a good charge, and so we are proposing that we would go station by station over the course of a year. We have the working group, which will provide us with this broader vision and guidance, and have public events focused on each station area.
So the working group will meet, I mean, I'm just looking at that first entry from August through October, which would be now through October 2018. The working group is going to meet, and then there will be a public workshop, like a public hearing for people to have input?
Even more. I think it will be an interactive, or they were planning
like people sitting around a table?
Probably having conversations, contributing their ideas. They're going to be talking about a lot of things in Parkchester, Van Nest. We're going to be talking about how does the station actually land in the community? Where do you access the station? This is really important because it makes it convenient for people. But we'll also be talking about the economy of the area and land uses in the area. This is all along Tremont Avenue, which we can talk a little bit about the details of each station in a bit. But it's thinking about all of those things together. Where do we want to grow around the station? Where does that make sense for the community?
Presumably there will be plenty of announcements, so people at the end will say, "Hey, we never got to have our say." I mean, I know that your intention is to make it as open as possible. And then, I say all the way, but it's not that far away. In January 2019, there's scheduled a public open house.
Right.
What is that as compared to the working group? And by the way, the Parkchester Van Nest is August to October 2018, and Morris Park will be September through November. Kind of simultaneously, they'll be working on all those
Correct.
things. So people in those neighborhoods, listen up. And then we're going to get to both Hunts Point and Co-op City in a minute. Go ahead.
So the working group will help us share what they know about the area, contribute their ideas kind of as a first round, prepare us for the public events. They will also, the working group will also be charged with helping us bring people to the public events. Then everyone is invited to attend the public events. They can come to each station if they want.
Anything in school auditoriums, those kinds
Absolutely,
of things?
in the neighborhood, absolutely.
neighborhood.
And then the open house is where we're going to take that information that we've gathered from the working group and from the public sessions and reflect back. This is what we've heard, this is the information that we've gathered, these are some of the conclusions that we're starting to draw in the process.
I should mention, and I will do it formally, you mentioned the borough president. The DOT Commissioner, Polly Trottenberg, is on the working group. The EDC Corporation President, James Patchett, and City Planning Director, Marissa Lago, is also in that working group.
Right.
Let's talk about what I mentioned at the top of the show, and that is the idea that this is not just a nice way, and hopefully it will be a nice way for people to get to work, but it also could contribute to our continuing development economically in the borough. How so?
It is, if I said before, and I'll say again, we don't have regional rail access east of the Bronx River. Hunts Point does not have regional rail connections. This is a way for us to connect Bronxites to jobs to the north. We know people travel all along into Westchester. About 40,000 Bronxites go north to get a job every day. So provide access to jobs to the north.
So they're going to Westchester County, they'll go to Connecticut, and in other words, we're so used to going downtown, you're saying that it actually will give Bronxites a chance to do more work up.
We have an incredible reverse commute in the Bronx. But I think for the economy overall, it's also connecting major job centers, Hunts Point, Morris Park, which are on par with some of the cities that are along the New Haven line. New Rochelle, for example, has as many jobs as the neighborhood of Hunts Point, as the neighborhood of Morris Park. So by connecting those job centers to the region, we can be more competitive, but it can also make it a more attractive place for people to do business.
I was just going to add that part of it. I think it would encourage companies and other people to say, hey, if we establish in the Bronx, we have an easy commute south, and we, of course, have an easier commute north. All right, are we ready to take a look? Let's take a look. These were literally drawn up by the city and the Department of City Planning. We thank Rochelle and all our buddies down there for doing that for us. This is going to show you where the stations are going to be. So let's put them up. Let's take a look. What are we going to see first? We're going to see something. Go ahead. You want to say
while we're
something?
waiting, I was just going to say, we're actually working closely with the MTA. They're providing technical advice to our working group. And what's important is that while we know the general areas of the stations, that's what we're going to show, it's over this next coming months that we'll be getting all the details down.
Right, so there wasn't a lot to work with, but I, as you know, I indicated that a lot of people are going to want to know where is this going to be.
Where is this in general?
So this is the Co-op City station, and the blue area presumably is the station that is Erskine Place and DeReamer Avenue.
Right. It's of course, this is where the rail line runs. So it's right under 95. It's a smaller community there, but to the north is Co-op City. Thousands of residents here. So the most important thing here will be getting access to the station and making sure that Co-op City residents and other residents can actually access the station without disrupting the community.
The body of Co-op City is north of there, and so whether it's a shuttle bus or a city bus or some way of getting people in the morning, they're going to want to be able to just
Connecting
or of course
bus
get a ride to the station like they do in the suburbs. Nonetheless, let's go to the next one. There are 4 of them. Okay, so this is the Morris Park. This is at Bassett Avenue and Morris Park Avenue.
Yeah, this is sandwiched between the Hutch Metro Center and Bronx Psychiatric Hospital to the east, and then Albert Einstein and Montefiore and Jacobi hospitals to the west, and major healthcare hub in the city. and definitely in the borough. 23,000 jobs here.
Think about how exciting that is for, I mean, you mentioned those places, the Hutch Metro
Yeah.
Center, which is one of the, developing communities, certainly business communities in the Bronx, as well as, of course, all the Einstein hospital
Yeah.
facilities. And that then becomes accessible even to people in Manhattan who
Yeah.
want to come up north and get there. Wow, what a tremendous opportunity.
Yeah.
All right, number 3 is the Hunts Point Station area. This will be at Hunts Point Avenue and Garrison Avenue.
Yeah, so this is sandwiched between kind of Garrison Avenue, and then we see some shallow lots there, and the Bruckner Expressway. And it's kind of in the rail line at this point is kind of below grade. And the most important thing here is that it has easy access to the 6 train. This is the closest the Metro North will get to the subway, so you can easily do that transfer. You could imagine someone coming and taking in the train and
literally right across.
Yeah,
Wow. I don't know if this is the time to ask you, or after we see the last one. What are challenges that you see? Let's show the last one,
Yeah,
and then
let's
I
look at
want
the
you to respond to that question. So this last one is the Parkchester Van
Van
Ness.
Ness, yeah.
Looks like a longer station, and this is East Tremont and Unionport Road.
yeah, and here again another population center here with Parkchester, and then the lower density
Wow,
community.
look how
of Van
close
Ness.
it is to Parkchester
Yeah,
as well.
it is. And Tremont Avenue today really acts like a back door along this area because of the rail line. Has these shallow lots, that not a lot of development can happen on them. So we need to really think about how do we provide access to the station. We have the Con Ed site immediately to the north, which we know we need. We want them to succeed here. So this is the other one, very important, getting access, but also how are we going to grow here?
So go back to my question then. What are the challenges, and whether you look at each individual ones or ones, because you spend a lot of time looking
Yeah.
at these kinds of maps in our neighborhoods, what are the challenges in establishing the station? I mean, you say that they're just going to pop them in where the rail lines are,
Yeah.
but what's involved other than putting up the signs and putting up the stop signs and everything else you need?
A lot of engineering work, and I think that's really on the MTA. Really, they're bringing on an engineering and design firm by the end of the year. So we really want to influence that design from the city's perspective. They're focused. MTA is focused on the station development and the service development, and we want to influence that as much as we can. But we also want to support that by thinking about how is the city growing? How are we supporting the streets that connect to those stations? So getting that coordination, I think, is one of the challenges. And then, of course, the unknowns.
This is why we're going to ask the people of the Bronx to come in. What do you want to hear from the people of the Bronx? When there are people who watch those maps right now and say, "Wait a minute," whatever they're thinking about. I'm not going to prejudge anything. What kinds of things do you want to hear? I mean, cheerleading is nice, but that's not our way in the Bronx. I'm sure people will have something to say. What do you want to
Absolutely.
hear?
I mean, people live and work here every day. These are their communities, and we want to hear from them how they might access the station. What are their concerns about the station development?
Traffic in the area?
We've started to hear some of that already. People wanting to make sure that the sidewalks are safe, the streets are built out properly. That yes, we have access to parking. How will the traffic flow around the stations? I'd also want to hear about people. How do they get to work? What would this mean to them individually? Thinking about, where do you want to grow in your community? And could we use the station as an opportunity for that?
Well, one of the things that I think many of us, and maybe even you, are somewhat frustrated on is that there doesn't ever seem to be long-term planning in the city of New York. You're like, I got an idea, let's put it here. And then the next thing you know, it wasn't the right thing. Seems to me, if you're talking about business development and business growth potentially around the stations or in coordination with the stations, it would be nice to have that go along with some kind of planning to say, well, this is where we're going to put the mall, or this is where we're going to put, and I hope we're going to do this, a string of small business opportunities, those kinds of things.
That's absolutely what we're doing.
Is that going to?
That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing, Gary. That's absolutely what we're doing. So we're going to work with the local communities to understand, for example, in Morris Park, Eastchester Road, Bassett Avenue, how does that relate to Morris Park Avenue, where all of the shops are, or to Westchester Square to the south? How can those support one another as we grow one area? These are absolutely focused on the station areas, but we really are thinking about the bigger picture overall.
I'm going to ask you about a couple of other projects. I guess the biggest issue, certainly, we look at the Jerome Avenue study and some of the other things that are happening around the borough. People are concerned about displacement. I've been trying to analyze this. There hasn't been a lot out about it. We're really the first ones on it. Is there that a potential danger? It seems to me the stations are all, self-contained, that there won't be that kind of displacement. Is there concern that some businesses or residences could be hurt or get in the way?
Well, that would be part of the discussion, absolutely.
I can guarantee you people in the Bronx will tell you if it's so.
That would absolutely be part of the conversation, because we're talking about trade-offs here. The stations themselves are self-contained, but I would say to you that this planning work and the kind of changes that we might be able to bring to these station areas are the difference between merely providing service, which we have at other Metro North stations, and really capitalizing on this major transit investment for Bronxites and for our economy. I mean, it's a huge difference to be doing this planning work now, thinking ahead, so that when the stations come online, we're ready.
We saw the one at Hunts Point, and the Bruckner is right there. That's due for overhaul. Will this be in coordination with that? And I know there are people in the communities. Municipal Arts Society came out in their comments saying they were frustrated by the plan that's out there. So why don't you address that a little bit?
So we absolutely have to consider all of the activity that's happening in that area, and the ramps that are proposed run to the east of this area, of the station area. The ramps proposal does include some important things like closing off the on-ramp from Hunts Point Avenue onto the Bruckner Sheridan. That will make it safer here on the street for the station users and for the neighborhood in general. So we absolutely have to coordinate that.
I'm sure you read the comments by the Municipal Arts Society. I mean, they're concerned about a number of different things that still didn't relieve some of the isolated areas. There's always environmental concerns. Do you want to address that or talk a little bit about what you read? And because the project seems to certainly be going forward. Let me just add that Assemblyman Crespo was here and he endorsed it enthusiastically.
Yeah, I mean, we've been working on the Sheridan and Bruckner interchanges for many, many years in the borough. The state,
Gee, I can't imagine why.
The state is the driver there. They're the decision maker. We have shared with them our concerns about things and suggestions, but they are really the decision maker. We had the planning process that we went through. We're hopeful to get the Sheridan converted to a boulevard to provide better access to the Bronx River parks, and then build off of that as well. So unfortunately, we're not the drivers here, and the state is the decision maker.
And let's talk about the Jerome Avenue study a little bit. You were you told me beforehand you felt good. You felt that the project kind of is going along well. Community board supported, certainly the local electeds supported it. There was a story that came out in the Norwood News saying that one tire shop was going to be losing his space. The only analysis I could come up with, if you have $1.8 million to stop people from being displaced, or at least to compensate them, that's not enough for all the people that are going to be displaced. Somebody's going to lose their place. I mean, I think it's just, is that true?
Well, I would say this. When we started that planning process, we were focused on how do we make Jerome Avenue work better for the local communities. And that was our absolute goal here, which meant we needed to bring new uses and different uses to the neighborhood. But that also meant we were focused on well, what's there today? And the part of the plan, so it include not just capital investments and improvements like schools and new parks and under the elevated investments, but also support for small businesses, funding for relocation, and direct services. We're going to have a coordinator that can be a one-stop shop for businesses all along the corridor to connect them to loans, to connect them to lease negotiation support, whatever that might be. And I would say this about, whether that's enough money or not. We really did look at, well, what were the number of uses that were along the corridor that stood the potential to be displaced? How many do we are very conservative when we make this, and by that I mean we assume a lot. And over time, this is all over time. This is not anything that's going to happen immediately. So, we've started to see one that's been affected, but we believe that the plan itself has a whole array of supports for the businesses in the community. And all together will support the Jerome Avenue community.
Before we run out of time, let's just wrap up talking about the rail service. What do you feel about it? How do you feel about it? I know there's a ton of work to go, but it's a
big deal.
Good project.
It's a big deal. It is a big deal, and I would say this is a really important time to be doing city planning in the Bronx. We are the fastest growing borough in the city, fastest growing county in the state, and we are projected to be the fastest growing, through 2040, and that's largely just due to natural increase.
Increase
in population. More people are being born here. More people are being born here. So we have to get this right. We have to really think and take advantage of the Metro North investment.
I'd like to see what I mentioned earlier in the show, and that would be a real vision of an entire package, not after the fact to say, well, they put the station here,
That's right.
and you know what, that didn't really help the people there, or we couldn't really get to it. So, I'm just hoping that
that's what we want to do.
All right, well, and you'll check in with us
Absolutely,
as we go
absolutely.
along. I'm going to go back to that timeline and say, when is Carol coming back to see Gary? All right. Thank you so much, Carol Samol from the Department of City Planning. Anybody who wants input, what do they do?
They should go to our webpage, which I think www.nyc.gov/BMNS, Bronx Metro North Stations.
Okay, and then there's an opportunity maybe to send an email or to have input.
That's right, email and public events.
And here's another way to look at it. If people have further questions or comments on anything they heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, they can send us an email at BronxTalk@BronxNet.org or send us a tweet at BronxTalk, and you can even post them on our Facebook page. We'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program, and we will present it to the Department of City Planning as necessary and even get you a personal answer as necessary, so don't hesitate to use us as well. Of course, you can find Bronx Talk on the web at BronxNet.org. Now, next week, we will have the highly anticipated debate for the Democratic primary in the 34th Senatorial District. Alessandra Biaggi and Senator Jeff Klein will debate. They have both agreed to do it right here next Monday night at 9 p.m. Thanks to our producer, Helen Greenberg. Our director is Nicholas Marrero. Thanks to the cast of Thousands. Thanks to Carol. Thanks to the people downtown. We'll see you next week. Good night.
Thank you. It goes so fast.